Hi Gateway kids and families. I have a lovely story for you today. This is the story of Timothy. Here he is. Timothy's grandmother was Lois and his mother was Eunice. Eunice chose his name because she knew that honouring God was the most important thing anyone can do. Eunice came from Palestine, but Timothy's father was from Greece, which is why he taught his son to read and speak Greek. They lived in a town called Lystra, where there were also people from Rome. So Timothy learned to speak Latin too. Timothy wasn't a very strong child. He was often ill and he was very shy. His father had great hopes that he would become someone important one day, but his mother just hoped that he would honour God. Here we have two stones to represent the stones that the 10 Commandments were written on. And this is some Hebrew writing, which is what they used in those days. Eunice believed in the one true God. She had learned about God from her mother Lois, and she longed to pass on her faith to Timothy. The stories of the people of God in the desert and the 10 best ways to live and about the temple were all very important to her. Whenever she could, she shared them with her son. And Timothy grew. He used to listen to his mother's stories, but he wasn't sure they were really for him. He was half Greek after all, and had never become a proper Jew. When he was a teenager, a preacher came to the town. His name was Paul, and he told everyone about Jesus. Jesus had come as the sort of king no one had expected. He had lived and he had died, and then he came back to life again. He was God's special rescuer who now invited all people to belong to the people of God. Timothy listened carefully to Paul. God came so close to Timothy, and Timothy came so close to God that he knew what God was saying to him. God wanted him to know that he was loved. God had a special work for him to do. As a follower of Jesus, he would honour God. Timothy listened carefully to what Paul said, and he also watched what he did. Even when the people of the town chased him away and stoned him so that he almost died, Paul did not stop believing in Jesus. When Timothy's own father died, Lois, his grandmother, and Eunice, his mother, also became followers of Jesus, and all three together used to read the stories in God's special book. There they learned that God's promises about Jesus were for the whole world. Sometime later, Paul visited Lystra again and invited Timothy to join him on his journeys. He would be helpful because he could speak and write so many languages. Paul became like a second father to Timothy, and together they travelled to Athens and Corinth and Ephesus. Once he even went to Jerusalem with Paul, taking some money they had collected in Greece to help the people in Jerusalem who were suffering from the famine. Timothy learned how to follow Jesus from watching Paul. Paul gave Timothy special jobs to do, like taking letters to the churches that Paul had started. Sometimes people would not listen to Timothy because he was still so young and because he wasn't very confident. But God used him, and he learned to trust in the Holy Spirit, who gave him love and power and self-control. When Paul went to Jerusalem for the last time, he left Timothy in charge of the church in Ephesus. He was to be its leader and help them grow strong in God. He was very scared, but God helped him. In Jerusalem, Paul became a prisoner and was taken to Rome. He wrote a letter to Timothy, advising him how to be a good leader. He called Timothy his true child in the faith. When Paul reached Rome, he spent a long time in prison, and he wrote his last letter to Timothy, encouraging him to remember how God had come so close to him and had given him a special work to do. He should remember how his mother and his grandmother had helped him to understand God's story in the Bible and how they had passed the faith on to him. He hoped that Timothy would visit him. By this time, Timothy's mother and grandmother had died. How proud Lois and Eunice had been of young Timothy. He had really grown up to honour God. In his last letter, Paul told Timothy to be strong in Jesus and to continue passing on the message to others, just like his mother and grandmother had passed it on to him. Timothy did go to Rome. He even ended up in prison for a while. But after Paul had been killed, Timothy was released. He continued the job that Paul had started. Because of Timothy, many others became people who honoured God.